are you? Happy Tuesday. How's everyone's week and summer going? I'm so looking forward to hanging with you and diving into our conversation today and just getting to share a look behind the scenes into my business. So we are officially today celebrating crossing the 200K cash mark in Kim Argetsinger Coaching LLC. It's always funny to refer to my business because it's my own name, which if you know me, if you know my work at all, you know we're so much all about the money here and not about the money at all. So that's a celebration. It really isn't about the money at all. And I'm always celebrating that we're scaling this business, doing the work I love, doing this my way, doing this the way that many people have told me I can't and that isn't possible. So I always want to be an example of that for you. I really do always want to walk my talk, my message, which is that you can build, grow, and scale a profitable, sustainable business on your terms, your way. And today I want to share a look behind the scenes at some of the investments I have made in my business along the way. I want to share a little bit about my mindset behind some of those investments and just really what's paid off, what hasn't paid off, and just overall looking at investing in your business. As a side note, I was thinking about doing a live stream next week, talking a little bit more about some of the mindset behind scaling on my terms and hitting 200K this year so far in business. So if you have any questions around that, if that's something you want to hear more about, whether you're live now or you're watching the replay, pop that in below, or feel free to shoot me a DM or a message so that I can be sure to address that. I always want to make sure these are serving you. So throw the questions at me. I always love those. So where to start here? Because I want to share a couple different things. I also want to share just some of my thought process around for all of you when I'm making some of the bigger investments in business, and then I will break down some of the exact investments that I have made in business, because this is a conversation we just need to have more about. I know overall, what I put in the email we sent out, I think there's such a general narrative that you have to spend money to make money. I mean, give me some like emoji praise hands if you've ever heard that. I think that's such a common phrase that gets thrown around, and I think that's absolutely true. And also, I think without context, that can be very confusing, and I think the pendulum can swing a little bit to either the one side where it feels like, great, that means I can just throw money at a problem, or if I just invest money, that guarantees that I'm gonna make money. And anyone who has just thrown money at the stock market and expected a payout the next day knows that's not always how it happens. But I think the pendulum can also swing the other way, where it's sort of like, wait, that means if I don't have money to invest, that means I can't make money. Or like one side is like, throw all the money, the other side is almost like, this feels scary, I can't, like, this is a bad thing. And I think we just have a lot of noise around this instead of finding what does this actually mean, what's actually true. How can we think about this in a way that serves your business? How can we think about this as a CEO? How can we really think of this through the lens of business strategy and what serves, temporary sustainability, but also long-term growth and scalability. So I want to chat about that a little bit. And I also think, I don't know, I think it's just also, I hear from clients all the time, like, what have you invested in? I think there's such a conversation around that that's helpful to have. But I also know, and this feels, if you're watching now or if you're watching on the replay, I'd also love to hear from you. I think there's also something that isn't talked about enough in our space, which is what happens when you make an investment that you feel like isn't a good investment. And I want to chat about that a little bit as well today, just to open up the conversation, not to throw shade. I read that term on someone's post this week, and like now the term is like migrated into my brain, but not to throw shade or to talk shit about past investments, because I strongly believe in even investments that haven't paid off. We still get something, we still learn something. I really do have that belief that everything is always serving us, but I do want to talk about that a little bit and just those investments that maybe haven't paid off as well, and just give you some thoughts behind those and what those have looked like. Hey, whoever's joined live, we're just getting started. So absolutely, as we're talking through this, throw thoughts at me, throw questions at me. I always with these, but especially with this one, and next week if we break down the celebration on my income win and just behind that, I want to be such an open book because I think we just don't get enough of that in the online space. So I just want to always know what's valuable to hear, what's valuable to know. So don't be shy if you do have a question. So I think just kind of before we go into some of the specifics around just how I've see investments or my thought process around those decisions, or even what has and hasn't served me in business, I think it's just helpful to come through the lens of when we look at business and we look at building, growing, scaling a business and what creates results in business and what creates the monetary results that are sustainable and scalable. I really come from the belief, and I think this is just true. Obviously that's a belief, but I really do think this is true when it comes to business, that no matter what, we're always investing something into business if we want to get results. It just always isn't money. So I think in general, we're either investing time, money, or some other form of resource, usually which is sweat equity in some way, which is our time or, leveraging friends and family's time. I have, friends in LA who had a restaurant who leveraged a lot of friends and family resources of time, which wasn't money, but that was something that was being invested into the business in order to bring in results. And I say that because I think, again, in our online space, there's almost this narrative sometimes where it's like you get results without anything on the back end. And I think it just can feel then really frustrating or confusing sometimes. And I just want to paint that picture that in general, I really can't think of anyone who has a successful, sustainable, profitable business and that's scaling that isn't investing something on the back end of those results, time, money, resources. So I think just so we're all on the same page there. So when I'm talking about investments, I'm not only talking about money investments, I'm also talking about time investments. Cool. Again, let me know if you have questions. What I will say is, for me, and I think this is where, when I talk about what are the investments that paid off and what are the investments that didn't pay off in my business, I think what will surprise everyone here, because I think the common thing in the online space is just go hate on a program you took that didn't make you $1 million overnight. And really what I would say is the biggest investment I made in my first year of business that did not pay off, I have zero regrets. I've learned so much, and anything in my business that was in air quotes failure, I think just makes me a stronger businesswoman and also a stronger coach for my clients. However, if I look back from what I know now, being 5+ years, 5.5 years, 5+ years into business, one of the things I see now is I really invested heavily time-wise into my business that first year, and I didn't invest money-wise nearly enough for the growth that I wanted. And I cost my business so much money because I wasn't willing to invest more financial resources that first year. And that really slowed down the growth in my business. And I think that's just something that's helpful to say. Again, I'm not mad at it. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I think I learned so much from that. I think my business is doing amazing. It's all fine, but I put in so much sweat equity that first year in business. And I sort of came from this belief of I've always been, profit has always been really in business, profit margin. It's always been really important as a value to me in business. But that first year in business was almost my mindset was the most profit margin ever at the expense of being able to build and scale. I wouldn't have been scaling then. I would have been really building and growing my business. And I share that because that's something that I think is just helpful to have as a frame wherever you're at in business. I think sometimes we can just look at, what is this costing me in the moment? What money am I gonna put in that I'm not gonna get back in the moment? And I think we can forget that when we're investing in business, that is very different than purchasing something in a store. When we are investing, really the whole idea is we put in something now to get back something later, right? So if I invest time in my business in the first year, it's because I'm expecting results in terms of clients and income later. If I invest money in my business, in team, in resources, in coaching, in classes and courses, right? That is because I'm expecting results later. And so I think that's just a helpful frame to have. And I think a helpful check-in for wherever you're at. This is something I have to currently checking in now as I'm investing more and more into team support. That's a really big investment we have right now in my business, to keep checking in with, yes, profit margin, huge value. I'm really proud of the profit margin we have. And it's also something really important with my business model to be mindful of, because as many of you know, I have a one-on-one business model that I'm scaling through revenue share, which is, I'm obsessed with it. It is amazing, but it is also it's not like we're gonna have a big launch next month and have a huge cash injection. It's very much a slow growth scaling process because I have limited availability. So it's really dependent on new clients coming in and then as they're growing. Meaning we do have to be mindful of investments we're making, even as we're bringing more income in, if we want to keep a healthy profit margin. But I have to be so mindful of that lesson I learned my first year in business, which is, but also remember not to do that at the expense of your scalability, of your ability to grow. So I would say that's probably the biggest lesson, the biggest investment I made in business that didn't pay off, which was really spending so much in sweat equity instead of looking early on at where can I stretch my capacity to invest monetarily to speed up the process of growth. So hopefully that resonates. Let me know if you have questions now on the replay around any of that. I'm happy to share more. I'm happy to share more around what that looked like. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, but please, please, please feel free to ask. So I would say that was the biggest investment I made, that again, that I'm not mad at it. I learned a lot. I learned how to do a lot, but I think this was the other piece I was going to share there. I think the reason it didn't pay off is not just that it stretch out my growth process, but I think something I'm always thinking about when we're making investments in business is not just what does it cost me now, but it's what does it cost my business in lost revenue, lost income, lost opportunity if I don't make this investment. Meaning that first year in business, when I really was like quadrupled down on sweat equity meaning I was doing all the work instead of getting support. What that meant was because it was taking longer for things to get done, for me to bring in results, I was also leaving money on the table every month. And if I look at the potential for my business in terms of revenue that it can bring in, if I'm not investing in a way where I'm maximizing that opportunity to come in, I'm actually costing the business money. Hopefully that makes sense. So when all of my energy is poured into that sweat equity in that first year of business, and I'm working so much, and I also wasn't investing in high level support in terms of coaching for my mindset, which you all know I believe is like the number one thing for business growth and scalability. It is a strategy just like your strategy. What I'm doing is I'm just leaving money on the table month after month after month in lost opportunity, because I'm stretching out that time in which I'm bringing in income. So, and hey, whoever just joined on, we're just kind of in the start here, but throw questions at me, talking all about investments in business and sharing my biggest investment my first year in business that didn't pay off, which was really my own sweat equity and time equity. Hey Marie, nice to have you here. So happy to have you here. Hey Danielle, nice to see you. So happy to see y'all. So just as we're kind of wrapping up that one, I'll pivot on to some others, but I think just as a recap there, just for everyone now, but also like as you're watching on the replay, just something to think about. Where are you investing a lot of time, energy, your own sweat equity, or not investing in support? And how is that actually costing your business or slowing down the growth, leaving money on the table? Hands down, my biggest lesson my first year in business, and my biggest investment that didn't pay off. Again, not a regret to it. I learned so much, but learn from me so you don't have to have the same learning and growth edge there. Let's see there. I'm pulling up my notes because I did actually write down all my investments here for y'all, but throw questions at me if you want to know anything transparently. So kind of after learning this my first year in business, if I rewind the tape, the first big investment I made, and I share this because I think it's just helpful to hear, was in a coach training program that was for a year. So this was before I started my business. I've been in business a little over 5 years, but I've been coaching for probably 6.5 years, just not in business that whole time. And that was my biggest investment. I paid in full. I remember doing some research, and I wanted to go into this. I really wanted to make sure I had some tools in my tool belt. And it was really interesting. And the reason I shared this is because I think it was a really important investment in terms of something to this day I still invest in, is continuing education and continuing to sharpen my craft and to learn and to grow and to deepen my mastery. And I'm always very mindful not to come from a place of I don't know enough, but really coming from a place of I really do believe in deepening our mastery of our craft and continuing to grow and evolve as business owners, as coaches, whatever it is we all do as creative entrepreneurs. That's something that is just such a deep value of mine. And looking back, this is all kind of first, this is before I started my business, but it's really interesting me, Kim, today at 6, plus years later, with all the mindset work I've done, all the growth I've done, I have such a different mindset when it comes to money and when it comes to investing and when it comes to investing in myself and my business. When I look back then, this isn't an investment that didn't pay off because I learned a lot, but I really see how I chose a program that, I'm trying to think of how to say this in a way, because I'm very grateful for the program and I got a lot out of it and I benefited a lot from it. But I really at the time remember having another option and choosing what was the most affordable, and then not choosing or not even allowing myself to look at, because this isn't even really so much about the program, but really the mindset around that investment, choosing what was the affordable program instead of allowing myself to look at, I'm sorry, I've got someone popping up solicitation messages on the Facebook. But instead of allowing myself to look out a little bit further in terms of what were some other options on the table because of the price point. And I share this because you don't always have to spend more to get more. You don't always have to get the most expensive, shiny program thing, right? Like, you don't need to get a Ferrari if you're going to be driving in traffic in New York City. Like, that doesn't always even make sense. And so again, I don't even know that this was like the wrong investment to make. But when I look at my mindset around investing in myself and my business, it was absolutely coming from this place of a little bit of scarcity and a little bit of like, what can I afford, instead of what can I look at here to invest in that's going to help me grow as a coach, as a business owner? What can I look at, like, where can I stretch myself and really look at this as an investment in myself and in my business growth to see what can I get as a return on the back end. And I share this because, again, this is one of those investments, it paid off, but I'm very mindful of, I'm trying to think of how to say this. There was, the program was amazing. So basically, I don't want to talk crap about the program. It's more me being like noticing my mindset then and the difference between that and my mindset now, which is really looking at an investment not from the dollar point. Like, the difference between Kim as a business owner who brings in $200K cash in 6 months and Kim as a business owner who had a hard time charging $100 as a coach. The big difference, like, one of the mindsets there is around money and is around investing in the business, and seeing, like, mindset there was very much around like almost like, what's the least expensive way I can do this? And like, that's all I'm allowed to look at, versus what's the best way to do this? What's the best investment? What's actually the thing that's going to serve me? Because again, you don't always need a Ferrari if you're driving in traffic, but I do think there's a different mindset behind even allowing yourself to look at what's the investment that will best serve me, that will best serve my business, that's going to give me the biggest ROI. So that's a really big lesson and takeaway looking back at that investment. But that was also at that time the biggest investment I had ever made in myself outside of my college education. So, we can look at it. It's very different to look at it 6 years later than at that time. But I share that because I think it is something helpful to think about as you're looking at investments in your business, and just to even notice, where might you be limiting yourself or playing small or limiting yourself in terms of what you think you're even allowed to have or look at because of price point, instead of, again, looking at this more through the lens of possibility and what that investment will give you on the other side of it. The big difference there, so after that, if I look in my first year in business, so as I was moving towards like, I don't need to grind it out anymore, I was in a very low paid group program for a little while to get support. And this was all like kind of that same mindset, which was, I think, it's a bit more of a scarcity mindset, but I think more of what it was is a not trusting myself to get results mindset. And so my investments that first year, it's like I was in a low paid, almost like membership type program. Again, great program, like no problem with the program. It's not like the program wasn't great, but it's really interesting to notice like, oh, this is like where my mindset was at to invest in this. This was also, I wasn't really allowing myself to be fully supported. I was really stretching out my timeline for results. I invested in my first one-on-one coach at that time, who will forever be grateful for. And I think what's really interesting to know about that coach and the coach I work with now is just noticing how with both of them, and this feels important to say too, I didn't get results that were on paper right off the bat from my investment. And this was my first like really big lesson in what it means to invest in yourself and your business. But that first coach, who I'm like forever grateful to, and my current coach who I still work with, what I started to notice in myself was my willingness to invest in myself at that level and to show up for it changed the way I started thinking about my business, my self-trust, my capability of getting results. But I also was getting results that weren't on paper because of what I was investing in. And I think that's something we forget about sometimes in business, which was really fascinating. And that first coach where, it wasn't like I was making, like I was fully booked at that time and, had shiny results to brag about. But the results I have today are still partially due to the work we did, because so much of what I did with that coach was build my business foundation. So much of what I did even in the group program that I was in, but with that one-on-one coach, it really was laying the foundation for my business. And I think that's one of the best investments I made, but best investments that didn't give immediate results, that didn't pay off immediately. And I see that because, again, I think we just don't talk about that enough in the online space. I think we're just so quick to think it's like, again, what I was talking about at the beginning of the live stream, put money in, get money out. Like, it's almost like we think of investing like I don't know, not even a slot machine, like an ATM or something. Put in your ATM card and it spits money back out at you. And I think what we have to remember, it's so much more like the stock market when you're investing in the stock market wisely, which is you put money in, and oftentimes there's a little bit of lag between investment and that return on the investment. And so that first coach, I really think about that. Like, here I am 5 years later, I'm still reaping the benefits from that investment that I didn't see that first, the first 6 months I worked with her on paper. I mean, I definitely felt the investment. I definitely felt the benefits. Anyone who's worked with one-on-one coach, I mean, it's a great experience, but in terms of monetarily in my bank account, I didn't really start to see that until later, but I would still say, like, hands down, what we worked on helps me today. So I think that's just a helpful thing to think about when you're making those investments, when you're making decisions around investments, but also when you're looking at, like, was this investment worth it, or did this investment work or not? And just thinking about, I keep using the stock market example, but I really think that's just a really great way to think about it. It's the difference of, like, how can I just get the stock that I think is going to pop overnight versus how can I play the long game with the stocks, knowing like the general trajectory will be up with my investments. Y'all are very quiet, so let me know if you have questions for me or if anything isn't clear, reflections, all of the things. I'm going to share some like more technical investments I made, but just while we're on the coach investment train. And it feels really, really, really important for me to say as we're talking about this, because I am a one-on-one coach. I fully believe in the power of one-on-one coaching. I think it's an incredible investment, but this is not a conversation to say you need to go and invest in a one-on-one coach right now. I think coaching is so beneficial for a million reasons. And there are also plenty of times people don't need a coach, or a coach isn't the right, the best next investment in your business. I've had literally sales conversations with people where I've told them, right now, I don't know if you actually need one-on-one coaching. Like, you might be looking at team support or something else. So as we're talking about this, I'm just walking you through some of these investments and the thought. Really want you to help you see the thought process behind it and some of the decision-making processes that have shifted and how it serves business. Please don't walk away from this thinking like this means now you need a coach. However, if you are interested in coaching, that's a very different thing. I mean, I personally am biased. I think it's life-changing, but just so we're on the same page there. So while we're talking about the coaching investment, after working with my first coach, I started working with my coach now, who I've worked with her now for 3 years, for a long time. whatever the math is there, I lose track of time. And I think what's really interesting there is I started working with her. I applied for, she runs like a scholarship type thing where you pay a percentage of your revenue, but you don't pay money up front. So when I started working with her, that was the investment. And I share that because it's the model I now use, obviously, in my business because I'm so obsessed with it. But I remember actually being a little like trepidatious around that. And so I say that just to normalize, because I think sometimes we think scholarships or the percentage model or I don't know, like any sort of investment, I think we think maybe we're the only ones who feel a little trepidation around that. I really remember feeling trepidation around that. And I remember the fear was like just around being able to pay their percentage. I had, some stuff come up around that. But I remember, I share this because I do have a percentage model revenue share with my one-on-one clients. And just to normalize a little bit, I remember one of my things was also, what if I don't make enough money to pay her enough? Which I thought was just a really interesting mindset for me to notice. And it's something we've absolutely worked through, but just to notice and to work through. And I share that again, just to normalize. It's so normal when you're investing in yourself. I think one of the gifts when we invest in ourselves and our business is also to notice the trash that comes up in our brain and just to unpack that a little bit. So that was definitely something there. And my first 6 months working with her, I'm still working with her years and years later, like changed my entire life, my entire business. Like I told her I'd give her my liver if she needed it. Like I'm forever grateful to my coach. And my first 6 months, I got results, and I got results on paper. But I think again, and this is why I want to say in terms of what pays off, my real results, like where it's like, yes, I'm making, my first 10K month, didn't come until I renewed with her the second time around, which was paying more money because I was no longer in the scholarship model, plus the revenue share. And I remember when I made, and I think this is probably helpful to hear, I remember when I made that investment, it was really one of those decisions, and this is the thought process I walk myself through whenever I'm making a stretchy investment, because I remember when I made that investment, it was more than or about the amount I was paying for my rent per month in New York City. And New York City rent ain't cheap. That I was splitting with my now fiance. And I remember thinking through wow, this, I'm about to say yes to something that I haven't seen monetarily. I'd definitely seen the results personally shift. And I knew the results were on the way, and I've always trusted myself to show up for investments. So that part wasn't scary, but it was just a really interesting thing to notice. And I think this is one of the first times in my business that I decided I'm going to invest in the thing I actually want to, the thing that I actually believe is going to serve my business, the thing that I actually believe is going to help me get long-term results. And I really think that's what helped me start getting more results from that investment the second time around. And it was just fascinating to notice that mindset shift around that, as opposed to, maybe a year ago where it's what's almost the most affordable way for me to do this? Again, not discounting the value of a program, but really the mindset in which I was approaching that program versus this thing is really expensive. I literally don't have the money for it. I'm going to figure out how to make that happen, but I'm going to allow myself to invest in my business and in the thing that I think is going to give me the best chance, the best return. And that was really a big mindset shift around investing in myself and business. And one of the things, and this is I think what I shared in the email that I said I would share, what I walk myself through, this is what I walked myself through then, and this is what I walk myself through now. I just invested, we just brought in a new team member, and if she's watching, I love you, I already appreciate you, and it was a little stretchy for me. What I walk myself through is looking at the next level version of me in business who has the success I want to step into. And really, I have a dialogue, a conversation. I usually journal it out. No shame if you want to talk to yourself in the mirror or something like that, but I find it easier to journal this out. But I usually journal out with my next level self, and I ask her for advice, and I ask her how she got to where she is, and I really just tap into what is she thinking, how does she believe, what does she think about money, how does she think about investing, what decisions is she making, and also really just coming from this mindset of, if I'm making that much money in my business, like, how does this investment look? And so I remember, and that's just kind of the tool I use. Like, I'm always trying to make decisions for my next level self, my future level self, instead of my current self. And this is almost like a whole nother live stream conversation, but the reason for that is so often, I don't know, probably 95% of the time, in our reality, we tend to look at our present life through the lens of past situations, which makes it really hard for us to move forward. Our brain is just looking for, how is this like something that happened in your past to keep you safe? And that's how we stay very limited. And so it's very hard for us to move past the biggest win, experience, celebration we've seen, the biggest amount of money we've seen in business. It's also really hard for us to move past limitations because we're kind of just like replaying those over present day. And so I find, especially when we're looking at investments and we're looking at things where the intention of making those investments and choices and decisions is to move yourself forward, is to scale, is to grow. I find it really valuable to, this is called forward pace thinking. That's an NLP term, but it's to pace yourself forward to get past that past thinking that's just sort of looking back over your shoulder, and usually a lot more fear-based and limited, and to look towards what is in the future. What is that thing you want to step into? If that has already happened, if that is inevitable, if you're making that happen, if you step into that version of yourself, what is he or she thinking? How are they behaving? What decision would they make? What decision did they make to get where they're at? I find that really helps get us out of those patterns that keep us stuck. So I find that very, very valuable when making decisions around investments. And that is the process I walked through with my now coach when I renewed with her. And that's, to this date, one of the biggest investments I've ever made and continue to make in my business. And I think what's so, and again, this is not a like you need to now go invest in coaching. However, again, I'm super biased. I think it's the best investment for most people that you can make in one-on-one or group coaching. But I think what's really interesting to see is that was the biggest investment I made at that time. I could not afford it. It was more than my current rent. Like I had a 9-to-5 at that time, and I was working kind of a side hustle to be able to invest in my business. And I remember I had exactly enough in savings to pay for 1 month of coaching. And that was it. And then I had no idea where it was coming from. I was like, I'm just gonna figure this out. But it was really interesting to see how that mindset and that decision and that investment has paid off exponentially. And so what I've paid into that, especially since I pay a percentage, is just basically a base rate and percentage, which is the same model I use. It's just really interesting to see how that is like tripled and then quadrupled, and I don't even know what the math on it is. But if I look at whatever I was making at that point, I don't know, let's say it was $5K a month or $6K a month. I think it was before I hit my, it was definitely before I hit my first 10K month. And now we're looking at, $200K in 6 months, and I've had my first 38K month. It's really interesting to see like, oh, that investment so paid for itself times a quadrillion, but I had to be willing to make that investment and believe in that investment and believe in myself to show up for that investment when I didn't have the money to be able to get that payoff. And I think that's just something helpful to remember when we're thinking about making those stretchy investments. And I want to share this with you because I remember at that time having a couple conversations with business owner friends and needing to hear that, like needing to hear it's okay, this is normal, this is safe, because I think otherwise I probably would have, knowing kind of where my mind was at scarcity wise around that time, I probably would not have made the leap. I was also very, very blessed. My now fiance, my boyfriend, then I remember very distinctly having a walk and a conversation and talking around that. And I think he just has a really good mindset around money and investments. And I don't remember the whole conversation, but I just remember like, well, he's like, that's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you invest in the thing that's helping you the most? And it was just like a very like simplified way of putting it. So I think, again, that is one of the investments that's paid off the most, but that's also just some transparency around the mindset behind it, making that decision, and also just like, that was scary AF. And that's normal. I always say when new clients are working with me, if they're feeling a little scary, like trepidatious around the investment, that's super, super normal. I think the place to check in with when you're feeling some of those fears around investments is to check in with, is this scary because I'm stretching myself and I'm stretching to that next level and I'm really leaning into that trust of doing something I haven't done before? And do I trust myself to show up for this investment? If so, I think that's a really safe thing. I think if it's feeling weird because it feels out of alignment, or you feel like you're being pressured, or you feel like someone's trying to tell you, if you don't invest in this thing, you're not going to make it, or like this is the secret, or this is the only way. I think that's probably more your intuition, your guide, inner guide compass telling you to run in the other direction. So hopefully that distinction makes sense. Because I definitely, again, I want to be really mindful here. I am not saying just go throw a bunch of money at your business and expect results. That's not what investing in money into your business to make money is all about. Just like none of us would just take money and blindly invest it into the stock market, right? We want to be mindful. And we want to look at, how is this investment something I believe is going to pay off long term? Okay. So another investment that has paid off really big in my business, and I thought would just be helpful to speak to because I think people always want to know this, has been software and like programs and tools to better serve my clients or to streamline the client delivery process. And I think one of the first investments outside of coaching and education, before things like, I think this was like before website, like I think websites are a good investment, but like before things like that, hold on, Light's doing a weird thing. There we go. Light's always so funky on Facebook, y'all. I need to try to get Zoom working again. But I think something I really believe when I think about investing in business is really thinking, how can I invest in the things that are money generating? So coaching, that is investing in my brain. That's investing in my mindset. That's investing in my strategy. That's investing in me. I am essentially the business to some degrees. So that's like a direct impact on my money. The next thing really is, I mean, there's things like team in term, which we'll talk about, but really here I think about like my clients, the people I support, literally the people who are paying me money, where it is my job to give them a great experience, to give them a return on their investment. I think of that as such a high priority. And so something that's always been a big lens in my business is sort of like, after investing in my own brain and my own education and my own like continuing to invest in that, is really looking at am I investing back into my clients? And so at the start of my business, that was like definitely, I think one of the first things I did was invested in Basecamp, which is, it's around $100 a month. It's not, thousands and thousands of dollars, but at the time it felt like a stretchy investment, which is the communication software I use for clients in between calls, and investing in I use Satori, like a scheduling and payment processing system. And I remember at the time thinking, and this is something I tell clients, if you're at the start of your business and you're just booking your first handful of clients, don't invest in a Ferrari if a Chevy Cavalier is going to get you where you need to go, perfectly fine. Or even if a BMW is going to get you where you need to go, right? We don't need to get the Ferrari of things. And at a certain point, if you're driving I was driving basically the like broken down 20-year-old car version of support things. I was kind of duct taping things together. I would like send notes through email and schedule people manually and send contracts manually, and everything was via email. And I really believe in having a client communication container. And so this was one of those things where it's like, okay, so I'm not driving the Chevy Cavalier. I need to upgrade to that. I'm driving the like broken down car that like we're not sure if we're going to make it where we're going. And so one of the first places for me in business was looking at, where can I invest back into clients? So tools like this to make the client experience better, to give a better container, to make the processes and systems with serving clients work better. I just think making it easy for your people, helping them have a better experience, making it easy for them to pay you, right? Like making that whole process easy, and also pouring back into clients. Like we have a budget for client gifts, things like that, I think is just always going to serve your business. And I think that is just one of the best investments, in my personal opinion, that I think pays off exponentially, again, because this is the lifeblood of your business, right? Your business doesn't exist if your clients aren't served well, if they're not happy. And I think it's such an easy place for business owners to want to scrimp. and to want to try to save. And again, there is a place for that. Like, I think when most entrepreneurs at the start are scrappy, be scrappy. We're all about that. But I also think, especially if you're offering high ticket service, a high ticket offer at a certain price point, I think there's something to think about. What am I delivering? What container am I creating? What am I giving on the other side? And thinking about how can I keep investing back into that from that standpoint. So that is an investment I highly believe in. I continue to make, we continue to look at. And then I think with that, something that feels important to say to this day, I do continually look at how can I continue to invest in education. I just signed up for a program for diversity and inclusion education in business with Annie, who was on the podcast. I think I mentioned that. So like that's a way I'm investing back into my business, back into my education, back into being able to serve clients more. But I also, like, I signed up for kind of like a supplemental training on some coaching, it was like maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And again, not from a place of like, I don't know enough, but more from a place of I always want to be sharpening my sword as a coach, as a business owner, and deepening and mastering my craft at another level. And so those are investments I'm always looking at, you know, pouring some money into, because I think nothing gives me a better ROI than when I'm investing in my brain and when I'm, again, investing in my clients from that way. Hey, Lorianne, how are you? Talking about investments in business. I don't think we talk enough about that. And I don't know, you totally don't have to share, but I don't know if you have any investments that have paid off really well, or any investments that you're like, oh, that's interesting. That one didn't pay off as well. I would love to hear. You don't have to share, but always interested to hear from someone else. I know you've made your share of investment as well. Okay, let me know, anyone else too, if you have questions, if you're watching on the replay. And let me pull up here because I have notes. I'm just gonna go through a few of these because I'm just looking, somehow we've already been almost at 45 minutes. But just kind of along that lines of investing back into my brain and being sure to invest back into things that help me invest back into my clients. Some other things that I currently invest in that I think have paid off exponentially, and not paid off in the way of like, I invest in this thing and I see dollars in my bank account, but in the way of, I know when I invest in myself, when I invest in my brain, when I invest in prioritizing my peace, I have an affirmation, when I prioritize my peace, that brings me more profit. When I invest in these things, and when I invest in things that pour back into my clients, that literally grows and scales my business, especially since I have a revenue share model. But some current things along those lines is I currently started a new form of therapy, EMDR. If y'all don't know what that is, it is fascinating and it is blowing my mind. I still invest in coaching. I invest in, with that coaching, I have a mastermind. Like I said, continuing education. I just signed up for that course that I mentioned. So these are all ways where it's like I'm pouring that back in, knowing that there's not going to be, it's not like I'm going to buy that course on, you know, or like that continuing education, and then I'm going to directly see that bring me a client or bring me revenue. But I know, if I'm thinking about this like the stock market, right? Long term, I know making that investment continues to help my business because of the way I can show up and serve and hold space, and the results my clients can get as a result of that. That continues to allow more money to come into the business. So there is a return on that. Lorianne says, so she's talking about investments she's made, coaching my team and all of my education. Heck yes to the education. I so appreciate you for saying that, Lorianne, because I think it's just something we just like don't talk enough about here. Like I think about how much I was blessed. I had a scholarship for college, but I think about what that investment was: time, energy, money, resources, plus training. Anyway, so I think those are investments we forget are directly tied to our income. So the two other things, well, there's a lot of other investments, and I'm hoping as everyone's hearing this as well, is to see like, wow, I shared my business brought in 200K in 6 months. And one of the things I think that's helpful to see is it did. But with that, while I have an excellent profit margin, my investments, my expenses have also increased. And that's what's also helped me to continue to scale. I don't think we'd be able to continue to scale if I still had the mindset of Kim, who was in her first year of business, which was really, how can I just try to do this on my own, just try to pour sweat equity into my business. Like, it's really interesting to see. I made the least investments my first year in business. I tried to do it all with the time, energy, sweat equity, and had the least ROI for my sweat equity. I have made the most investments in the past 6 months ever, to the degree where I'm like, I'm making more investments than I used to, make it my 9 to 5 in my business, but I'm also getting the biggest ROI ever. And I think that's just helpful. Again, not to create the story, you just throw money into business and it gives you money back, but there is a degree in which making those investments really does help your scalability and your ability to grow. So a really big investment that I started making in business, and I think it's been about 3 years now, is team. And that's what Lorianne mentioned. And I know we've done lives around team. I've spoken so much to team, so I'm not going to go too much into that today, but I think that is just worth speaking to. My biggest investment, my biggest expense, if I total it up, it's more than my coaching investment, which is some paid in percentage. That is a pretty big investment, goes to team, and that continues to go to team, and that is worth every penny and more. And I literally would not be able to bring in the revenue I am in my business if I wasn't investing in team. I would hit a ceiling because I have a one-on-one model. Like, literally there wouldn't be enough hours in my day to do all the things if I was trying to just kind of sweat equity it out. And that feels so important to say, again, because I think we forget that. And I remember when I made my first investment in my first VA, how scary that was. And again, just to make that really transparent, so scary. And I still had my 9 to 5 when I invested in that virtual assistant. And one of the lessons I learned around that investment that I continue to learn with team and with investing in team to open up space to scale in your business, and not investing in team with this whole idea we're talking about, which it is, how can I invest in this so that it can help me get a return on my investment? Not how can I just throw a bunch of money, cross my fingers, and hope that that will bring money back into my business. That's not how investments work. But I remember really, I think I was having a conversation with my coach, which was, I had to invest in my first virtual assistant before I really had the income or the revenue in my business and the client base to warrant needing a virtual assistant. But that is also what helped me to leave my 9 to 5 job, because I made that investment in someone else who helped free up my time. Remember, my biggest investment was my time and my sweat equity. That freed up so much time so that I could bring in more clients, so that I could focus on the things only I can do in my business, so that I could bring in more revenue, which actually allowed me to leave my 9 to 5 faster. It was actually really fascinating. When I got my first VA, I think I left my 9 to 5 within a few months after hiring her. And again, not to create a story like that is like the secret or the recipe, but I think sometimes we think it's wait until I need this, like get the results first, then make the investment. And I think it's just so helpful to see there's a trend here. It's make the investment first, right? Think about the stock market. You make the investment first, some time lags, then you get the return on the investment. And that's been the case for me with every team member. I love my team so much. Thank you all. If any of you watch this on the replay, but I just brought someone else new onto my team, and it's definitely one of those stretchy things where I'm like, oh, this feels a little stretchy. And I had to play through that conversation we talked about earlier, which is next level Kim, who's making the income at that next level. What is she doing? What support does she need? What decision would she make? And she would say, you need to invest that in that support now so you can free up your time, because there ain't no way you're scaling your business if you don't invest in some more support now. Because otherwise you're just getting back into investing all back into time, sweat equity. Lorianne says, I hired my first VA before I had clients. Same with hiring a coach, not dependent on having clients first. Thank you so much for saying that, Lorianne. I think it's just so helpful to hear it, not just from me, and to hear it from others. And I bet most people would say that is the case. And I think you were smarter than me, Lorianne, because I waited until I had clients and revenue coming in before I hired my first VA. You missed the beginning of the live stream, but I basically cost my business and slowed my growth down so much my first year in business because I insisted on doing everything myself and pouring all my time and energy into my business and essentially working until like 2 or 3 in the morning, I do not recommend. And so I think it's just so helpful to hear from Lorianne. She probably did it, not smarter, but I think this is, this is the way, if you're talking about like what's the investment that pays off, just pouring time and working until 3 a.m. in the morning, that's not an investment that pays off. Investing in a VA before you have clients, investing in a coach or support, whatever that looks like for you, before you have the revenue, that's actually the faster path to getting those results. So, and Lorianne says, yes, having the right people support you to leverage your time. It is all about leveraging your time. And at a certain level in business, I mean, Lorianne knows this. Lorianne, we might just need to do another live stream and chat about this, because that would be, if I wasn't putting you on the spot, I would like try to bring you on live now. That's the whole name of the game, right? At a certain level in business, you have generally more money, resources than you have time. Your ability to scale is in direct correlation with your ability to leverage your time and to leverage your team and to leverage your resources and assets, which comes back to making investments. Lorianne says, I get that. Leverage time, leverage time, leverage time, leverage team, leverage assets. That is the name of the game. Lorianne says, yes, let's do a live together again. Yes, please. I'm texting you after this. So everyone, we'll have a live with Lorianne coming up at some point. We'll make that happen. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up on investments. So a couple other things here, I think just helpful, like really practical things here. I didn't mention a website and branding. I did at a certain point invest in a website and in branding for my business. I did not invest in that at the start of my business. And I'm actually really grateful. I think that was a smart investment, because by the time that I did spend money, and it was not inexpensive, and getting the professional website done, I had such a better understanding of my business and my message and what I needed to have put onto a website. I also was in a place where talking about time, had the time freed up to even be able to speak to a designer and be able to speak to all of that, because that is a time investment. And this is something, it's almost like a whole side tangent, but I find something that trips up a lot of business owners, and they almost start the other way around and pour the time and energy into the website up front. And I think websites are actually, I think it's a really valuable asset in my business, and I think it serves me really well. But I think it serves me well because I waited to make that investment at a time where really, talking about like leveraging your time, you also want to leverage your investments and make them at a time when it really serves you. So I feel like I made that at a time, again, probably like, I think it's similar to the team and the coach, where I was like, probably a little bit before I felt comfortable to make that investment. And I was really, I was really lucky and had some, I had a family member who had a really cool hookup with some of the website stuff. So like, I was really lucky, and it was still stretchy in terms of that investment for me. And it probably felt like a little bit before I was ready to do that. And that, I think, is kind of how that's exactly the right time. Because then when that website was finished and I had invested in that, and I think it just positions and represents the quality of work and the level of service of my coaching a lot more, I think it's really helpful then, and it really serves my business. And in terms of ROI, I know, because I hear from so many clients, they land on my website, they're like, it just sends a different message. I've had people find me through my website. So it really does act as it's like a little Kim on the internet for me. So it really does serve me, but I do not think it would have served me had I done that my first year in business. Marie says, yes, LA Live. My word for the year that I created with you too. The live you did last year has totally changed the shape of my year. Oh, Lorianne, how great is that? I also know that Marie knows to call you LA. And Lorianne says, yes, let's do, that's what you said earlier. Let's do a live together. Okay, it's happening. Have to think about, if you'll let me know, we'll have to think about topics on that. Some other like really practical things I think is helpful to think about, like investments in business. I invest in an accountant. I have an excellent accountant who I adore, who also helps me make smart investments on things like not a financial advisor, I'm not allowed to give advice around finances, but in terms of some of I have an S Corp, so the way my business is set up, we can allocate certain money to my retirement from my business, which helps save the business some money in taxes. And so these are really smart investments. I absolutely had to pay for the legal fees for an S Corp. I had to pay for contracts and all of those things. But though paying for an accountant, paying for an expert, paying for someone who understands these things, and that is their job to pay attention to these things and take care of these things for me, means I get such a return on that investment. That is one of, like, for sure the best investments I've made in my business, because if I think about, okay, I'm paying X amount of money to have someone help me manage my money and to make smart decisions that helps me save money in a really safe way and protects my business. And same with investing in, proper legal contracts that protect my business and really put that structure around it. These are all some of the best practical investments. And I share that because I know, because I hear this from clients all the time, I think these are also the kind of things where, like contracts especially, where it's almost like, yeah, but do I really need that? And I personally come from the school of thought that these are some of the most foundational important things to have in place, because it's you treating your business like a business. It's you treating your business like a successful business and with respect. I think it's creating a container for clients that's coming in, really kind of sets the tone. But I think something like an accountant as well, just from a mindset and manifesting perspective, I really think it puts out an energy just even in the way you're thinking about money and the safety you're creating for money to come into your business. Aside from the practical, really, really practical ROI of those sorts of investments. Lorianne says, aw, thank you. And then she says, I invest in cleaning company, massages, body work. Those are, so I love what I love about that is, so some of the other things I have on the list here to what Lorianne's talking about. One of the things I chat with clients about quite a bit is thinking about when you're investing in business. I think sometimes we almost go to the website, the most expensive thing, and we forget sometimes the biggest ROI, if we're talking about leveraging time, is investing in things that give you some time back at home. It doesn't even have to be in the business. So like Lorianne is saying, a cleaning company. I have quite a few clients who are parents and moms, or dads, and we're looking at what are things they can invest in that way to free up some time so they're getting time with their kids, or to get some support with kids, or for cleaning. I live in New York City, so we get grocery delivery. I will invest, sometimes what I will do is spend money on an Uber, which allows me to take an extra client call instead of spending that time commuting somewhere else, because it's so much faster in an Uber here. Well, not always, but depending on what I'm doing. So it's convenience, but it's also literally, I can see the ROI in my business. So similar to Lorianne, we look at some of those day-to-day things that leverage time, and they're also convenience. And I think to what Lorianne is saying, things like massages and body work, this is kind of what I was talking about with therapy. These are things that allow you to invest back into yourself. If you are your business, if you're the golden goose that lays the golden egg, if you're the engine, you're the most important asset to invest back into. And if you're not investing back into yourself regularly, it's really hard to then expect your business to keep bringing in ROI. So I love Lorianne that you included things like massages and body work, and we do the same thing here. I don't know if those are a tax write-off. I'll have to ask my accountant talking about that, but someone who knows about that will have to tell me if that counts as a tax write-off. I think it should. Lorianne says, an assignment I give clients, 1 to 2 massages. Wait, hold on, it's going up. Per month, dinner with friends. Laura says, hopping on late, but hi. Lovely faces. We're talking all about investments, the good fun kind right now, Laura. I love that you give that as a homework assignment, Lori. That's brilliant. I think I'm gonna start giving that as a homework assignment. Laura, your homework assignment? No, I'm just gonna give out homework assignments for massages. I really like that. And I had dinner with a girlfriend last night, and it's really interesting that you say this in lieu, because I knew I was having this live stream conversation, and I knew I was gonna talk about some of the bigger investments like coaching, but I was thinking, I took an Uber for exactly what we were talking about here. I had a later client call, and I knew if I took an Uber, then I could do that. So it was like an investment in my time and leveraging my time, but also my ease and peace of mind. And then I went out to dinner with a friend, and I was thinking, this is such an investment in myself and in my business. And this is directly correlated with the money I make in my business, because again, y'all can borrow my affirmation. When I prioritize my peace and joy, that brings me more profit. And I really believe that. And it also is interesting because it just changes the frame around spending that money. So I love that you said that. Laura says, oh, I'm on it. Laura says, changes then, success is an inside out job. It really is. Maybe that's our live stream topic. Okay, let's see here. Do I have, and a couple other things here. So, and this is more just for transparency, because I think sometimes it's also just helpful. I think we just wonder, like, what do people invest in? And if you're, bringing in 38K a month, or if business is bringing in $1 million, which is not my business right now, it will be, what are people investing in? And I think just seeing, like, there is a, as income increases, as revenue increases, there tends to be an increase also in some of those expenses and investments. And I'm saying that so that, again, we can just normalize that and not make that something wrong, but also not hear income wins and think someone's taking all of that money home. Because even if you have an amazing profit margin, that's just not the case. And remembering, like, those investments, time, your resources, and money are also directly correlated to your ability to scale because of all the ways they're allowing you to leverage your time and your energy and your assets. So some just like other simple investments I've made, photos in my business. I don't think these are like a make or break for any of us at all, but those are absolutely something we've invested in. Coding for my website, tech support, these are things that we have someone to support us with. And that really goes on the team side, but absolutely on the team side. With the team this year, because I started the podcast, that's been a whole new investment in terms of bringing on a podcast editor and support with some of those show notes and things like that. And that was a large, that was a different investment in business than doing something like a live stream, which is time. This is a time investment, but the podcast is time, and I'm allocating, income from the business, revenue from the business for that, for the ROI on that. And the reason I shared that, actually, the note I have here around the podcast, and I think just something to think about with investments like that and where my mind goes, and the reason we don't make certain investments in my business. So there are definitely other things we could invest in that would help with visibility, that would help grow my audience, that we don't invest in because of the whole idea with investments being linked to an ROI, a potential ROI. And I know I'm fully booked. I have, limited spots we can open up. I have a one-on-one model. It doesn't make sense for me to invest in certain things in my business, even though they're smart investments and they would bring in results. They're not going to bring my business an ROI. And that is now, I think, the big lens I look at investments through, that I think is a good place to close this on, instead of just rattling off every little single investment we're making. What we're looking at now so much is, how does this does this open up space for another client? Does this open up brain space for me to create new content, or to take care of myself and to invest back into myself? Otherwise, no matter how great an investment it is, it doesn't really make sense for my business to invest in. So something like, I was just having a conversation with someone around Facebook ads. I think Facebook ads for a lot of business models, quite honestly, they can be a great thing. I have, a client who's using them really well. I have a family member who's a multi-million-dollar business who uses ads, and ads are huge. Like those, that is a great example of those results would not be coming in if that investment in ads was not being made. That's an example, like, this investment helps create the capacity for scaling. And in my business, that would be the worst investment ever. Like, what would I do if I ran ads? Where would we be running them to? How would that serve my business? It literally wouldn't serve my business model at all. You can make arguments for some of the visibility, and it would feel good. But I say this because when I started the podcast, that was something I really had to think through, in terms of, I am fully booked. I am putting out content consistently. This is going to be a form of content that I am now investing, not just more time. So I'm taking time away from clients, right? I'm taking time away from serving people, but it's also an investment that's taking away a resource of revenue from the business. And I really had to sit with weighing out how much I wanted to do the podcast and around what that ROI was going to be. And, some of the things, and I think strategically a podcast makes a lot of sense for me long-term for multiple reasons, but I really enjoy I also just want to do it So I almost didn't care about the ROI on that because I really, really wanted to do the podcast and I love it so freaking much. But I think strategically it also makes sense because it gives me content on a platform that is off social media, which is really important to me. But these were all things I was thinking through as I was making that, because that was an investment of 2 types of resources there. So share that just because that's really the lens I'm now looking at investments through in business. And I just invite everyone, thinking about this, whatever stage you're at in business, I think that can be helpful, as opposed to just, if I just throw money at something that's going to give me money back. That's not always the case, right? If I think about Facebook ads in my business, that's not going to be the case there. Whereas if I invest money into my team, that might actually support me in bringing more revenue into my business, because it frees up brain space. It allows me to support my clients more. The more I support my clients, that actually brings in more revenue in my business. So I think really looking at your investments through that lens, instead of kind of letting that pendulum swing that we talked about at the beginning of the live stream, which is either invest all the money, just throw money at the solution and hope that brings you an answer. That's not how we want to make investments. Or I'm so scared to invest, I need to wait till I have the results to invest. And finding that middle ground where you're really looking at this strategically. And again, looking to the next level version of you, what serves your business, what gets you there, what helps you get to that level, making decisions from that place instead of at where you're currently at, I think can be really, really valuable. Lorianne says, bye, talk to you soon. Bye, Lorianne, I can't wait to go live with you. I think that wraps us all up here beautifully in a bow. If there's any questions now or on the replay, throw them at me. Just seeing it here, if there were any big notes I wanted to throw at you. I think these were the main things here. But just to close this out, as one of my clients was teasing me today, because I always say at the end of our call, either to tie this up in a bow, to put a pin on this, or to wrap this up, to put a button on it. So to put a button on our live stream here, investing in business, I have yet to see a business that does not investing some sort of resource to be able to bring in revenue, whether that is an asset, whether that is time, sweat, equity, or whether that is money. And let's just normalize that. And then again, just looking at where is that pendulum swinging for you that we were talking about, so you can bring it more to the middle and making those informed, conscious decisions about investments, but also remembering that investments in general, right? It's not always you make an investment, you get a payout. Oftentimes you make an investment and then you get the payout, and thinking through that when you're making your investments in business as well. So you're not just trying to make an investment for that instant gratification, but you're also not making yourself wrong if you make an investment and don't get that instant gratification. Again, some of the biggest investments that have paid me back in literal revenue, but also heart, soul, fulfillment, peace, all of that have been the investments that took a hot second to give me that ROI. So I hope that's helpful for you. I hope seeing a look behind the scenes was helpful for all of you. I love you all so much, and I'll be back next week. Next week we're gonna chat a little bit about, I'm gonna share a look behind the scenes at bringing in 200K cash in 6 months my way, which I always like to. I'm just so proud of that and happy about that. So if you do have any questions about that or anything you want me to speak to before I go live next week as you're watching on the replay, feel free to throw those at me. And then, I always forget this too, we do have spots. I think I have one spot opening up in August, and then I have some spots opening up in September. So if you are interested in working together, I'll be sure to drop a consultation call link for you below. All right, I love you all, and I'll be back next week, and we'll dive in then. Bye.